A first generation entrepreneur, in my definition, is someone who was the first person in their family to start a business. Now, sometimes people will say, well, my grandfather on my mom's side had a lemonade stand or something like that, right? So I guess you can extend it a little beyond that and say, if you were the first one in your family to start a business, or to the extent that your parents may have had some kind of business, but it really doesn't translate to what you're doing today, then that makes you the trailblazer here. You're creating your own path, which means it's kind of uncharted territory. That makes you a first gen entrepreneur in my book. Honestly, it goes back to my own personal experience. I was the first person in my family to start a business. This was back in 2006. And because of that, my family, they were proud of me for doing it, but they really had no experience to draw from to give me any kind of advice, support, mentorship. And looking back, I desperately needed that and wanted that. And so I was kind of out there on my own, just figuring everything out as I go. And that is a really uncertain, anxiety inducing, stressful path to take. It was a wonderful experience, but I couldn't help but think, man, what if I had had access to that type of mentorship and support during the first, say, 5 years of my journey? And so now that I've sold that business, was looking at my next chapter, thinking about all the other first gen entrepreneurs that are out there, I thought, how can I help them in a way that gives them the support that they need, reduces some of that uncertainty, that anxiety, helps them avoid making the costly mistakes? And I felt that the community model was the best way to do that. So a second or third gen entrepreneur really, I think, has a lot of advantages over a first gen. Not the least of which, oftentimes, if you come from a successful entrepreneurial family, it means there's some financial resources there that can back it. I knew a couple of guys who fall in this category that were second gen. It's like they had 50 darts in their hand, and you can just kind of keep throwing darts until you hit a bullseye, because you've got the financial safety net there to take a risk. It's not all that risky if you can always fall back on your family's resources. Whereas I was sitting there with one dart in my hand, and it's like, this has got to work. But then it goes beyond just, coming from money or having rich parents or however you want to describe it, because I think a parent or grandparent or whoever it is that is like a built-in mentor for you can really help describe all the challenges that you're about to face, right? And help you to avoid the pitfalls. And because you're family, they're going to be empathetic. They're going to be passionate about your success. They're going to connect you with resources, whether it's their accountant, their attorney, maybe your first few clients, what have you. Because they are vested in your success, they're going to pool all of their resources, not just monetarily, but all of their experiences and advice to help you to succeed. And so I think when you put all of that together, it creates a lot of really big advantages that a second gen entrepreneur would have that a first gen, frankly, misses out on. So it's kind of like walking around blindfolded. If you start having conversations with first gen entrepreneurs, it quickly becomes obvious that, they just don't know what the next few steps are. And you can kind of do some research on the internet, or you can, try to ask around a little bit. But at the end of the day, you don't know what you don't know. And so that, when you're feeling like you're walking around blindfolded, that can be a pretty stressful thing. And so I think as a result of that, you also wind up making some unforced errors, rookie mistakes, as they call them, some of which can be fatal to your business, unfortunately. I mean, we all know the statistics about the percentage of businesses that fail in the first 5 years. It's roughly half of them. And I think that number is way too high, personally. And how many of those would have survived if they had just had some of that mentorship and advice to avoid the pitfalls from the get-go? So I think what happens a lot of times is someone will start a business on the premise that they have some sort of technical skill and they can go out and market themselves and market that skill and make more money by the hour doing it for themselves than they can working for someone else. That's exactly how I started. And while that may be true, there's still this concept of product market fit. And so, what that really boils down to is not just do I have a skill, but what problem am I solving for my ideal customer? And who are my ideal customers? What are their demographics? What are their psychographics? What pain am I solving for them? How am I getting them to their desired outcome more quickly? How am I saving them either time or money or reducing that pain? And being able to actually do the research to figure out how big your market is. So, for decades or longer, they said it was impossible to run a mile in 4 minutes, right? Many people attempted it and they got close, maybe, but they just never got there. And then the day someone actually ran a 4 minute mile, what happened in the months and years after that? All of a sudden, there's this flood of people who are now doing it. So, do you think that the human race suddenly just became capable of doing it that day? No, it was a mindset. It was a genuine conviction and a belief and a firsthand witnessing of what's possible, right? And then that opens you up to suddenly realizing, hey, I can do this too. And so if you've witnessed what's possible as an entrepreneur right there within your family, whether that's a certain monetary number or the scale of how big you can grow a business, or the fact that it's even possible to just determine, hey, this is a skill or a product that I want to bring to the market and I'm going to just go do it. For some people, the idea of that is just like, oh my goodness, how is that even possible? But for second gen entrepreneurs, they've seen it firsthand and they have genuine conviction that it can be done. And now they can go out there and get it for themselves. It's the exact thing that I wished I had when I started my business, if I'm being honest with you, because I did have a small network of people that I do business with, here in town, but a lot of them are going to be my customers, right? So you can't exactly go to your customers and tell them all the things that you're up against in your business, because that doesn't instill confidence for them. So that's risky. You can't talk to your employees, because if you start divulging the things that are stressing you out as a business owner to your own employees, you're going to stress them out too. And that's not their role. And then my whole platform is you can't really go to your family. I mean, you can, but at best they're going to be supportive without any actionable advice to give. And at worst, they might be critical of you and say, those little comments like, have you ever thought about going back and taking a real job? Which is like the most disheartening thing you can possibly hear during a period of time when you're really down and out about the way things are going. And so a community of your peers, that's where the real value is, because they know exactly how it feels. They've been through it. They have actionable advice to give. They believe in what you're doing because they themselves are entrepreneurs who see the vision and want to see you succeed. They're not going to be critical, but they are going to be honest with you and give you real feedback on what you need to grow and to overcome those challenges. Something that I am only now realizing after owning a business for 15 years and being an entrepreneur for about 18 years now, looking back, I had and probably still have limiting beliefs that I didn't even know existed. I'll give you an example. When I was growing up, I had an idea of how much money my dad made. I thought it was about $50,000 a year. It wasn't something that we talked about openly in my family, but that was my guess. So to me, do you know what my idea of success was when I got out of college? $60,000 a year, right? I was thinking if I could do that, then man, I've really arrived at that point. And so fast forward some years later, I was having lunch with a gentleman whose father was an entrepreneur. And this gentleman was telling me how at best, his dad only ever cleared about $500,000 a year. Literally 10 times what my idea of normal was. And so whether or not you think that that is an appropriate or necessary amount of money, like let's not get hung up on the amounts, but just focus on the mindset. One person thinks this is normal, another person thinks that literally tenfold that is normal. And so between those two mindsets, which person do you think is more likely to make more money at the end of the day? One advantage I think a first gen entrepreneur has is your creativity is the limiting factor. So as creative as you want to be is how far you can take this thing. So one example that comes to mind for me is the guitarist Mark Knopfler, if you're familiar with him. Dire Straits was the band, and I remember an interview with him once where he felt imposter syndrome because he never took formal guitar lessons. And so he was just learning this stuff on his own. But because of that, he really developed his own unique style that if he had taken formal lessons, that might have been a bit of a constraint for him. And he might have wound up sounding like everybody else. But because he was figuring this out as he goes, it is completely his style. And if you listen to any of his music, if you're into music at all, you would be able to pick him out from a crowd because it's just uniquely his style, right? And so I think a first gen entrepreneur has a similar advantage. If you can get past the survival stage and you can really find your own groove and doing things in a way that makes sense to you, it's going to help you to stand out in a crowded market, which is such a huge competitive advantage. You march to the beat of your own drum a little bit, and for the right crowd, that really is a very attractive, compelling offer for them. And so as an entrepreneur, if I decide in the middle of the day that I want to go for a walk in the park, that's completely my choice. And for a lot of people, that is priceless. You really can't put a number on that. And whatever it is, the fact that you just have the freedom to do that and you don't have to ask permission from anybody else is really hard to put a price tag on that. And so you take that freedom of time, the autonomy that comes with that, the freedom of choice to choose who you want to work with and choose what you want to do for work. You know, if something that you're doing isn't really giving you kind of satisfaction, you can choose to do something else that you do enjoy, right? And how to make a living doing that. The fact that entrepreneurs, successful ones, can actually earn a lot more than they would if they were working a day job is, in my view, just kind of icing on the cake. But you take all of that and pair it with the fact that half of all entrepreneurs fail in the first 5 years, I think is a real shame. And I think a large percentage of that percentage could have actually survived and even thrived if they had just been connected with the right people and had the right support along the way. So that's my kind of final thought on it. I think entrepreneurship is and can be a wonderful, game-changing thing for your personal life and for that of your family, and can have all these wonderful benefits when done correctly. And so it's worth it to invest the time and the effort to surround yourself with the right people to make sure that you get there.